What's the story, Morning Glory? What is the word, Hummingbird? Thank you so much for clicking on my channel and for joining me for this review of The Real Housewives of New Jersey, Season 13, Episode 3, Boys Will Be Boys. So we start off with where we left off last week, which is Danielle's mozzarella party. And Teresa and Melissa were going back and forth about seating arrangements, etc. And they finally decide just to push that aside. They're not going to, be in any kind of agreement with that. They're not going to be on the same page with that. So they went ahead and was like, you know what, let's just move on. And so they do a fake makeup. To me, it's totally fake because how many times have these people made up and then they're right back in the trenches? So they do a fake makeup and Teresa's happy now, or she fakes happiness. And she asks Melissa, well, do you want to be a bridesmaid? And Melissa declines because she's not gonna, do it after the fact. She should have been asked in the very beginning, not after, they had this argument. No. She's not going to accept the scraps that Teresa's going to be throwing at her. So she says, no, it's okay. And I think this is probably how the whole table arrangement thing went for the engagement party. I think that initially Teresa probably did not have Melissa and Joe sitting at the table with her. And then maybe she got caught hell about it. And then she invited them to come sit with her and they declined because it was after the fact. So that's why Teresa has so much confidence saying, well, I offered for them to come sit at my table, but they declined, leaving out the part where initially she did not have them at her table and she was only offering it as, an afterthought. So let's move on to Dolores. Dolores. So Dolores and Paul, they're hanging out and Frank comes over. When he shows up, he knocks on the door, nobody answers, so he just walks on in. And these are the things that Paul really doesn't appreciate. So Frank comes on in and Frank invites Paul to a guy's night out, and it seems like Paul had accepted the invitation. And in Frank's confessional, he says that once Paul realizes that I'm not a threat, then our family can go back to where it used to be. Which means where he is, very much involved with Dolores, and him and Dolores are a package deal. And Paul's just going to have to accept the fact that if he wants Dolores, he has to accept Frank. So, that's Frank's ultimate goal. It's cute. It's endearing. I mean, I think Frank and Dolores are adorable together. There's always going to be a part of me that's going to root for them to get back together. But I know that Dolores deserves somebody a little bit better than Frank, because I don't think Frank is done womanizing or chasing skirts. So a little part of me will always want them to be back together, but Frank is going to have to do a complete rehaul of his life before I would be completely comfortable with them reuniting. But I know it's not going to happen. I know that Dolores will never go back to Frank. She's been through way too much with that man. And like I said, Frank really hasn't given up, chasing women. So yeah, but they are adorable. And it would be great if Paul could accept them as a package deal because there's nothing going on between them. And I don't know if that's what Paul is really worried about, or he just doesn't want the interference of another man, period. But yeah, it is what it is. So let's move on to, oh, and by the way, Frank was there. So a photographer came over, and I thought the photographer was going to take, really cute Easter pictures of Dolores's dog. But she ended up taking pictures of Frank as well, dressed up in a bunny suit. And I didn't understand what was going on, but it was cute. It was funny. Moving on to Melissa, Margaret, and Jackie. So they all meet up for lunch and they talk about what happened at the mozzarella party. I think it was Melissa or was it Margaret? One of them brought up to Jackie how, the reason why Danielle didn't invite you is because she's not feeling you at all. And Jackie was like, why? What did I do? I barely even had any kind of encounter with her. And they tell her, well, when you did have that encounter with her, when you were introduced to her, you looked her up and down and she caught that. She noticed that. And it made her feel very uncomfortable, like you were judging her. And Jackie said, well, of course I looked her up and down because she was a hot mess. It looked like she just took her shorts out of the dryer and put them on. She looked a complete mess. So Jackie owned up to it, that's why I appreciate Jackie so much. She always owns up to her stuff. So Jackie said, well, she could have called me and talked to me about whatever issues that she had with me. But Jackie, that's unrealistic. Who's going to call somebody and say, hey, let me tell you the problems that I'm having with you, even though I barely know you? No one's going to do that. So they talk about Jennifer, and they're all of the consensus that the reason why Jennifer is acting the way she's acting is because she's going through something with her husband, Nabil, which is exactly what I said in my last review. I think there's something going on with her and Nabil, that's causing her to act out like this. That's causing her to lash out with Margaret and everybody else. There's got to be something going on because it's just really vicious. And it's like, where's all of this nastiness coming from when supposedly y'all had made up last season? But, it is what it is. So then we move on to the other house. What is her name? I can't believe I forgot her name. She's the one that is married to the guy that, Fudo. I think his last name is Fudo. That housewife, Mrs. Fudo. I forgot her first name. I didn't even write it down because really didn't care. So Fudo, Mrs. Fudo, they take their daughter, their oldest daughter. She's going to be 2 years old. So they take her out for her pictures, her 2-year-old pictures. And as, she's sitting there looking at her daughter, she's reminiscing about what she went through to be able to have children. So when she had gotten pregnant the first time, she ended up having a miscarriage. After that, she says, I never got pregnant again. And I was like, oh, so they used a surrogate. But I think she meant I never got pregnant on my own again. I think that's what she meant. Because it sounded like she said after the miscarriage, I never got pregnant again. But then she has two daughters. So I think like I said, I think she meant I never got pregnant on my own. Because they had to go through IVF for their 2 little girls. And they have 5 more embryos frozen. And so she wants another baby. And so she tells her husband, Fudo, hey, we have 5 embryos and I want to utilize them right now. And he's like, we have a 3-month-old and we have a 2-year-old. Can we wait a little bit? Can we wait at least a year? And she's like, no, we can't wait a year because it takes about a year to go through the whole IVF process. And you're going through it not knowing if it's going to be successful and if you're going to have to do it all over again. So the more time that you push back, the longer it's going to take to, hopefully obtain a successful pregnancy. So she's like, no, I don't want to wait. I want to have another baby right now. I want to knock all of this out, as soon as I can. Time is of the essence. So we'll see how that turns out. Then she started crying at the photo shoot. Moving on to Teresa. Y'all, this is what happened to me last season with The Real Housewives of New Jersey and possibly the season before that. Whenever there's a Teresa scene, I'm just so full of anxiety. It gets me so anxious because Teresa makes me so upset. I like Teresa, but I feel like she allows herself to be completely misguided. And what makes it even worse now for me, for this season, is that I see that her daughters are also, I feel like, kind of misguided as well. So not only do I have to watch Teresa going down the wrong path, now I have to watch her daughters as well. And when I say the wrong path, I'm talking about just continuing this this tension that's between her and her brother. I don't really care about Melissa. Melissa is whatever. My issue is between Teresa and her brother. It absolutely bothers me that they are not getting along and that they're having this issue. And it's caused by Teresa's damn husbands. Because it was the same thing with Joe Giudice. Now we have Louis. And I just always get anxious when there's a Teresa scene. So here we are. So Teresa's at home with Louis and I think her 2 oldest daughters, Gia, and I don't remember the name of the second daughter. It's not Melania, because I think Melania is the third one. And it's not Adriana. What is her name? We have Gia, we have Adriana, we have Melania. I can't think of her name. So, and they're talking about what happened at the mozzarella party. So Teresa fills them in on that. She talks about the argument that she had with Melissa, but then they did make up and then she offered Melissa to be a bridesmaid. And Gia says that you shouldn't have done that. You should not have offered her to be a bridesmaid. And her daughters also say that Melissa lied about the whole seating arrangement thing at the engagement party. It didn't happen the way Melissa said it happened. So they want to perpetuate Teresa's lies. So then the girls say that Melissa and Joe were not there for them when their mom was in prison. And that was a little bit shocking to me because I have a feeling that the girls would not lie about that. Whether or not their aunt and uncle were there for him when their parents were incarcerated, when Teresa was incarcerated, because they said that the only time that Joe and Melissa would come around was when the cameras were there. Other than that, they didn't see Joe or Melissa. And I don't know. I find that hard to believe. But then I'm thinking, why would they lie about that? That's a very blatant thing to say. And that's a very, it's a very hurtful thing to say if it's not true. So I'm thinking they wouldn't say this if it wasn't true. But then are Joe and Melissa the type of people who would throw their nieces to the side simply because they're not getting along with Teresa? And there was a lot of tension during that time between Joe Gorga and Joe Giudice, because this was when, Joe Gorga, Melissa's husband, was going around saying that Joe Giudice put his mother in the grave and put his sister in prison. So I really don't see Joe coming around all the time if Joe Giudice was always there, because there's tension between them. So I don't know. I don't know how to take that. I don't know. I feel like maybe they were not as present as they would like the public to think, but I don't think that they were just showing up just to do scenes for the show. I don't think it was that like that opportunistic. Like, we're only going to show up, or the cameras there, are they filming? Okay, we're coming over. And if not, they're not coming over. I just don't see Joe and Melissa being that way. But maybe there's somewhere in the middle is the truth. They weren't coming over every single day and giving them, bags and bags of money, because Joe Giudice was still living there. But it wasn't as infrequent as only when the cameras were there. So I don't know. And I don't think we'll ever know. So, Teresa said that she asked Melissa, okay, this is what we're talking about, and Gia said that you shouldn't have asked her to be a bridesmaid. So that whole scene to me was very full of tension, and I didn't care for that scene at all. And then Louis, the whole entire time, Louis just kept talking crap about the Gorgas. He just kept on talking crap about them. Just really, saying that they were, that they were lying. And I forgot what he said, but he had nothing nice to say about the Gorgas. So then we move on to Danielle. She's meeting up with Melissa, and they're talking about Jackie. And Melissa tells Danielle, hey, you were right. Jackie really isn't feeling you. And then Danielle was like, yeah, so I made a really good decision by not inviting her to my house. So then they start going through. So then Danielle says that she and Melissa are going through similar situations. They're going through very similar situations as far as, this family conflict. So Danielle tells Melissa her story and says that her and her brothers, only two of them, were very, very close. During the pandemic, Danielle began doing a lot of posting, I guess, on her social media, like everybody was doing on Instagram, on TikTok. Everybody was posting stuff on social media because everybody was quarantined. So when she would do these videos, her brother would leave comments making fun of her, and it got to her. It made her feel some kind of way. And so she would block him. And so he was blocked. He could no longer make comments. And because she blocked him on her social media, he did not invite her to his wedding. And then it got so bad that he didn't invite anybody in his family to his wedding. So she's like the Teresa of the situation. She's the Teresa of the situation. And so while they're talking about this, Melissa's listening to the story, and Melissa's like, I feel like there's something else missing. I feel like there has to be something more than you blocking your brother on social media for making comments under your post. There has to be another reason that you and your brother are not getting along. And so Danielle says that she blames her sister-in-law. She says, if my sister-in-law would encourage my brother to reconcile with me, he would. But because he's not reconciling with me, it's letting me know that my sister-in-law is perpetuating this distance between us, that she's encouraging him to not make up with me. And Melissa was like, I'm not so sure. I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I'm the sister-in-law in your situation. And I've always encouraged Joe to talk to his sister and to reach out to his sister. But if he doesn't want to do it, it's out of my control. I can only do so much. So I have tried to encourage my husband to reach out to his sister, but he doesn't want to. So you just cannot assume that the reason why your brother isn't reaching out is because his wife isn't telling him to. She most likely is telling him, but he doesn't want to. But Danielle doesn't buy that. She still wants to blame, the sister-in-law, which is a lot easier to blame the one that you're not blood related to than it is to blame the one that you are blood related to. But I agree with Melissa. I think there's something else going on in that family besides him making fun of her on her social media post. Let's move on to Jennifer. She's at home with her family, assigning her children chores so that they can earn their own little allowance and whatever else. And so she sits down and she has a conversation with her husband, and she tells Nabil, about the mozzarella party, how Margaret came after her, and Nabil is trying to be the peacemaker, be the middleman. Both of you are at fault and both of you, blah, blah, blah. It's always, the both of you, the both of you, the both of you. And so Jennifer is upset with him because he never takes her side 100%. He always has to see things from the other person's point of view as well. And that makes her upset because she wants her husband to be mad with her, to be like, yes, girl, I hear you. I feel you. I understand you. Margaret's horrible. What she did was wrong and you were right. But he's not that kind of person. So he's always looking at things from both sides. And that's just who he is. And I'm like, girl, you should know it. Maybe that's just how your husband is. Moving on to Danielle. So her parents come over. Her little girl has a little presentation that she wants to do that she couldn't do in school because of I think of COVID or whatever. So her little girl is going to do this little art presentation. So to give her an audience, they invited her parents over. And the little girl does her cute presentation. It was really adorable. Valentina is her name. And after that, they talk about how, they miss the brother. He wasn't there. She couldn't invite him because they're not getting along. And we find out that even the mother, Danielle's mother, doesn't talk to her own son. It got that bad. And it makes sense to me that the mother doesn't talk to her own son because, the mother probably has felt some kind of way towards the new wife, towards her daughter-in-law, and has said some things about her son's wife. And so the son cut his mother off as well. The only person that talks to him is the father. And the father started crying in this scene because he doesn't like to see his children not get along. And he talks about how every single day he thinks about when his son was first born and how excited Danielle was to have a little baby brother and how she was running around the house saying, I got a buena, I got a buena. So the father is reminiscing about that. And he's like, I just wish my kids would get along. And it's really, really sad. And I'm thinking to myself, Danielle, do you see what's going on with Teresa and Joe, where their parents passed away without seeing their children ever reconcile? And you don't want that for your parents. So it was a really sad scene. This it's so crazy how they decided to cast Danielle for this show. And she's going through an issue that's like the mirror opposite of Teresa's issue. She's the Teresa in this. And you would think that her and Teresa would bond because they hate their sister-in-laws. But instead it's Danielle and Melissa that are bonding. So then we move on to Melissa. We're at home and her mother and her sister come over and they're having a conversation, of course, about Teresa. And they find out that they were not, Melissa and Joe find out that Melissa's mom and sisters were not invited to Teresa's wedding. So this gets them all riled up. So I think somebody asked Joe, did you ever try to talk to Louie? And Joe says, I did try to talk to Louie in New York. I tried to let Louie know, hey, can you please go talk to my sister and have her, admit that she was wrong. I'm thinking he's referring to the things that she said to him at the reunion. And Louie told Joe at that time, he said, I don't think she's going to agree to do that. So Joe said that Louie, instead of making the situation better between the two siblings, he's actually made it worse. So now we're going to move on to Guy's Night Out. So this is the night out that Frank Catania had arranged, the one that he invited Paul to, but Paul didn't show up. And they tell him that, well, he didn't come because he had to work. So in Joe Gorga's confessional, he says, no matter how hard Frank tries to reach out to Paul, Paul ain't biting at all. So then everybody shows up. Louis shows up last, and it gets very, very tense and very, very heated. So they start talking about Joe brings up, why didn't you invite my wife's family to the wedding? Because you have to understand that my wife's families, my in-laws, show nothing but the utmost respect and love and compassion towards my parents. So you are disgracing my parents by not inviting my in-laws because they were very, very tight. So Louis says, but your sister, you and your sister get on your podcast and talk crap about me and Teresa, all the time. So, like, why would we even reach out to your wife and her family when she's constantly saying negative things about us? So, Joe says, so it goes left. They get into an argument where, it just gets really out of hand. Joe calls Louis out of his name. He calls him a very derogative name. They're threatening to fight each other. The other guys have to step in and kind of calm them down. Louis says something about, even your nieces, don't want nothing to do with you because I live with your nieces and I hear them every day. They don't want anything to do with you because you're spewing lies about their mother. And Joe was like, you don't know anything about my family. You've only been in this family for a moment. You're going to sit up here and act like you know all the ins and outs of my family, but you don't. Joe then tells Louis to be quiet. Louis is like, I'm going to say whatever the hell I want to say. You're not going to control me and tell me to be quiet. Louis said that he tried to convince Teresa to invite Melissa's family and to have Melissa in the bridal party, in the wedding party, but he couldn't. He says, I tried to tell Teresa, hey, invite your brother's in-laws, put your sister-in-law in the wedding. He says he couldn't convince her to do it. So he's like, what do you expect me to do? And so then Louis suggests that Joe and Teresa should have a conversation. They should meet up. Joe says, I don't want to do that, or I'm not going to, I got to think about it, because what I'm worried about when I meet with my sister is that I'm going to get hurt again by her. So that's what he's worried about, which is, very understandable, because at the reunion from last season, Teresa was horrible to her brother. Horrible. And I think there were even moments where Louis was trying to tell her to, kind of cool it, and she didn't listen. And she just kept on attacking her own brother. It was horrible. So we'll see what happens if they're going to reach out. Now, the previews for next week, it shows that, he does reach out. They do reach out to one another. I don't know who called who. And so we're going to see how that goes. But it's going to be, it's going to just get me filled with so much tension. That is my review. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. On your way out, please don't forget to rate the video if you like this content. Go ahead and subscribe, and I will definitely talk to you later. Bye.